and gentlemen, welcome back to another AutoCAD 2021 video tutorial. Here we go. We are creating whatever this thing is. Alright, there's another teacher out there across the country that asked me to make a couple videos for him. I don't exactly know what this one is. If you know what it is, hit me up in the comments and let me know. But we're going to call it a cam offset for now. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to inspect our drawing here. We're going to figure out what we have to do, and we're going to go from there. Looking at our drawing, it says you're going to use the ellipse, circle, array, and fillet commands, which is exactly what we're going to use. It says you can change your drawing limits to be 297, 210. I don't use drawing limits. To the best of my knowledge, I think it just sizes down your drawing space. That way you can stay within your limits, and then you can print based on your limits. But I don't think it's important, so I never really looked into it. And then obviously you can change your units to be something other than inches. I'm in the United States. Inches are our default size, so I'm just going to leave that alone. Okay. Dimensions not required. Use a continuous line type, which is just a regular line. Draw the framework representing the center lines, which are going across the middle both ways, and then complete the drawing. Okay. So as I'm looking at this, I'm seeing a big ellipse around the outside. I'm seeing a slightly smaller ellipse on the inside, which is 12 smaller. And then from there I see my center lines. I've got a couple radius R6s out here for the radius of these curves, and then I've got what looks like a gear that has 8 different teeth on it that we're going to create one of and then array around the 360 degrees. Okay, so let's jump to our plan or our AutoCAD. This is what it's going to look like when we're done, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with the ellipse tool. Alright, so the ellipse tool is up here, or you could type ellipse into your command line. What you're going to do is you're going to click the center of it. By the way, I'm in 2021. If you guys are in an older version, there are a couple differences, and I'll explain that as we go along. But for the most part, everything is just about the same. Okay, so with the ellipse tool, it wants to know where the center of the ellipse is. It wants to know as you're moving out to the side, and I'm going to go out to the right here. As it's counting up, you can see that you can type a number. And I'm looking at the plan again, and the plan says that it's 150 wide by 100 tall. So if it's looking for the radius from the center to the outside, that would be half of this number, which is 75. So I'm going to go out to the right, and I'm going to type 75, enter. Height is 100 total, but the radius of that would be 50. So we get something like this. Okay. Now the thing about an ellipse is that the curves might be subtle and then change to a little bit more harsh all the way around the outside. So all of these different curves are different. This, because it has the 4 points in the center, is called a true ellipse. But there are other things that are called polyline ellipses. So if I were to change the P ellipse value to be 1, and then I were to draw that same ellipse, you'll see that it now is showing all the different curves. The difference is that you can offset this one by 12, and then you'll be able to trim this without a problem. So let's say I had lines, and also there's no center line if you're on the P ellipse 1, which is a big deal. That's gonna change a couple things as we're going along. But we're actually not going to use this way. I'm just putting in center lines here. I'm going to show you that you can trim the ellipse little by little because of all those different curves. Now that one doesn't want to trim because it's probably just one that would get erased because there was nothing to trim at that line. But you can see that that is a trimmable ellipse. So if you wanted to go that way in one of your drawings that you're doing, and you could do this drawing that way as well, you can change P ellipse to be 1. I'm going to change that back to be 0, and I'm going to draw it the regular way. But showing you the issue is that when I go to offset this by 12, I now get a spline which has a bunch of different vertexes on it and vertices, which is also not very friendly for trimming and for continued offsetting. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I think this is the easiest way to teach it and the easiest way to explain it, is that I'm going to put my center lines back in, and you can see we have a center here for this one. Let's slide left, let's click, let's draw back over here, and then we're going to go this way. Alright, now I want this next ellipse to be 12 inches smaller, okay? And that's going to get us to the outside right here. That's what we need in order to start building these little curve shapes. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take these lines and I'm going to grab them and move them in by 12 rather than doing the offset. So this one's going to slide down 12, that one's going to slide in 12, and slide up 12. I think this is the easiest way to explain it. The other way that you can do an ellipse is you can just have the lines like this, and you could grab the center. Ooh, something happened. Oh, that line is actually going up. Sorry, let me fix that line. Let's back up a step here. What happened is rather than going up and clicking the intersection, I think what happened was I clicked one of the, let's slide again. There had to be a midpoint or an endpoint over here of one of these curves, and I must have clicked that. So that's what happened. But now you can see based on the grid here that that line is actually going horizontal, and we're not going to have the same issue. So let me bring these in by 12 again. I knew there was an issue because in the center, these points should line up with each other. There should just be one point in the center if you get it correct, whereas my point was up here somewhere, so it wasn't fully centered. All right. So here you go. Going at the midpoint, I can just click this and then click that and then erase these. Although I'm actually going to leave these. Sorry, I'm going to need that for the next part. But that's probably the best way to draw multiple ellipses, because now we have two true ellipses and they're easier to trim. All right. So moving forward, looking at the plan, you can see that we have this area is 12, okay, and each one off the center is going to be 6. So if I take my offset tool and I go 6, 6 up, 6 down, that's going to allow me to do fillet radius 0. Oh, sorry, fillet radius 6, because it's on the plan. I'll show you in a second. We can go from here to here, and it doesn't disrupt the rest of the ellipse. Whereas if you were working on the other set there, each arc would have to be, you'd have to pick the correct one to fill it. Otherwise it would be too short or too far away, and it's just a little bit too much of a headache to draw it that way. So I decided to do it this way. All right. So let's go again, fillet radius 6, and we'll go to this one. Okay. Now you can see when I go to trim this that it is trimmable, which makes life a lot easier than it does the other way. Okay. If I were to take the true ellipse and offset it in and get the spline, you wouldn't be able to trim the spline without using cutting edges, and it just is a little bit too difficult. All right. So moving back to my plan, you can see this says radius 6 on these curves, and the reason why I know this one and this one and this one are all the same is because it says TYP. That stands for typical. Okay. You'll see this on architectural plans sometimes when things are all the same size and you don't have to over dimension to show 6, 6 all the way around. Okay. So typical means that anything else in the area that's like that is going to be typically the same size. All right. So we got radius 6. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw the circle here, which is a radius 38. And that's going to go around here, but we're going to just steal that part and that part of it. So I need to find the center of where that circle is going to go first. And you can see that off of this center line, if I go 38 over, I get to the center of this gear, which has 8 different teeth on it. 38 from there is going to get us where we want to go. So 38 over, 38 radius. 38 is my offset. By the way, if you're trimming in 2021, as soon as I'm in the trim command, it's already going to, anything you click is going to trim out of that space. Whereas if you're, I believe, 2020 or older, you would have to do trim. It would actually give you cutting edge trimming, meaning like you would be able to click 1, 2, enter, and then whether you want in or out trimmed. Or you'd have to hit an extra enter if you wanted it to be a quick trim like this is in 2021. Okay, so any one of my other videos will show you guys how to trim the correct way if you're on an older version, but if you're on 2021, it's this way. All right. So now radius, let's do a circle radius at this center point, and we're going to do 38. Now you can see that I have fillet radius 6. I can go from here to here. I can go from, now you can see that part of my, let's back up a step here. Part of my ellipse is going to get taken out here. So what I'm going to use is actually a tool called break. I'm going to click this and I'm going to break it at this point. Okay. And what that's going to do is it's just going to separate this one from the rest of them. And that way, hopefully right now, when I go fillet radius 6, it's not going to take the part that I want, because now I can just do another fillet radius 6, and I can go from this curve to there, and we get the shapes that we want. I'll get this line out of there. I'll take this one out for now. Actually, I'm going to need that center, but I'm going to drag it over because sometimes things bother me when they're over here. I want this part to look done. All right. Trimming. I want to trim this part out. I want to trim that. I want to trim that, and then I want to get rid of the rest of this curve. So these shapes are done. Oh, sorry, I missed a fillet. Fillet radius 6. 1, 2. 1, 2. Those parts are done. Okay. This line will keep. These will get rid of. And now I have the center of the next gear part. So we're pretty much about halfway there. All right. All right. Looking at this gear thing, we have a 44 diameter as the inside and a 50 diameter on the outside. So make sure that you're using your diameter tool, or if you're on the radius tool, when you go to click the center, it's going to ask you, do you want diameter? And you can click diameter. So we had a 50. Spacebar brings me back into the radius tool. Even if you're in the diameter, spacebar does not bring you back into diameter, it brings you back to radius. So center, make sure you hit diameter again, 44. All right, we got 2 like this. Now I'm going to build one of these little teeth here, and then we're going to array that around. They are 45 degrees apart, and there are 8 of them. Okay, so that's important. So now looking at the dimensions in here, I've got 8 across for one of these teeth, which means that from the center line, 4 down, 4 up. So offset 4, I'm going to go 4 up, 4 down. I'm not going to keep this side because I want to do the array. Okay, I'm not going to keep the middle line. I am going to trim the rest of this circle around the outside, and I'm going to trim the inside part of the inside circle. Okay, now what I'll do is I'll grab these 3, and maybe I should do that again because I went kind of fast. So I want one tooth. I want the inside, and I want it to go out, curve, in, curve. Okay, so I will not need these parts out here. I won't need the inside parts, and I'm only creating one so I can get rid of those. I am going to trim the outside so I don't have that going around anymore, and then I'm going to erase this line and trim the inside point. Now you could trim this inside point later too. Maybe I'll just do that. But this is going to be an array, and it's going to be a polar array. And remember, polar array is kind of like a clock. It wants to know where the center of the clock is, and then it wants to know how many degrees around. Okay, because you get the different menu up here in a second. So here's the center of the clock. It's already set with 6 items at 60 degrees, but we're going to change that to be 8 items. And when I click in this next box, you should see I actually had a double click in there. I'm not really sure why. But you'll see that it changes to 8. There's 1 on the left, 1 on the right, 1 top, 1 bottom, and then the 4 angles if there is 45 degrees. And if there was an X here, that's where they would line up. You would close the array. Remember that you can't edit this array unless you explode it. But in this situation, we actually don't need to edit it. We just need to trim the inside, and then this part is done. All right, now last thing we're going to do, we're going to go off the center again. We're going to slide all the way to the right and all the way, I'm sorry, that's all the way to the left, and then all the way to the right. And then we're going to slide up, click, and slide down and click. So we get the lines going across for our center lines. The way I do center lines is usually I will extend them by, you know, if it's on a drawing that's like on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, we'd go 1/4 of an inch. But in this situation, I'm just going to go 12 on each side. So we'll slide out 12, enter. That way they overhang the outside of the drawing a little bit. We're going to turn our line weights on. That's down here. Let's see. Let me move my window because you guys probably can't see that. I'm probably in the way. But right here is show hide line weight. So click that, make sure it's on. Now I can grab any part of the drawing that I want to be a thicker line weight. And then we'll go back to our center lines in a second. This I can probably just go like that and get that whole thing in there. Basically I want everything but these 2. So even easier than that, just grab everything and then hold shift and deselect those 2. And now you've got everything that you want to be, and I usually make those a 0.7 because it looks nice. All right. Oh, the array. Okay, this is perfect. So you can't put a line thickness on an array unless, guess what? You explode it. So now these are all separate. I'll click all these again. Ooh, did I not explode it? Explode. There we go. Alright, so all of these now, we can change the line weight to be 0.7, and then it looks all pretty. Alright. Last thing, line types. Okay, go into your line types. You're not going to have this yet if you just started a brand new document, so go to Other, and then you're going to do Load, and we did this in the last video as well. You're going to go to Center, but we're going to use the Center X2, which is a little bit bigger of a center line because this drawing is 150 inches by 100 inches, which is a pretty big drawing. Alright, so obviously the scale of this drawing was probably not supposed to be this big, but it looks the same, and I just didn't feel like changing my units. Alright, so Center X2, hit OK. I already loaded mine, so I'm going to hit cancel, but for you, you just load it in there. You'll see it come into this menu here. You can hit OK. Grab your two center lines, change them to be Center X2, and then the last thing you're going to do is, normally the LT scale, which stands for line type scale, is set to 1. If you went to print this and you weren't happy with how big the center lines were, you could change the LT scale to be something like 5 or anything like that. It's just going to scale it up a little bit to make those lines a little bit more obvious that they are center lines. Alright, and that's it. That's the end of this drawing, and we're calling this the cam offset. And listen, I appreciate you guys watching. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, if you like seeing the stuff that I'm making here. If you turn on that little bell, I don't usually say this, but if you turn on that little bell, that'll tell you when I put up new videos. And usually it's every day, every other day or so, you know, pretty often. Alright, so I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. See you later.